I already have a cool car, right?
This is a great scope creep conversation.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Scope creep. Yeah.
Probably hang on to this
Do a
one.
lead in.
Yeah. Probably. Having a car that has no engine or drivetrain, I bet you scope creep just comes right along with that.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Here, welcome to podcast number 420.
We're not recording.
It's recording in the top corner. It says it right there.
Yep.
Is it?
I clicked it on because we haven't really done a cold open in so long. Like ever since we started doing Zoom, we've really dropped the ball on the cold opens.
Well, and so we've had so many guests too. We haven't had like the original crew just in here to.
Not in the last couple weeks, yeah.
You know?
Did we have? Did the shake weight make it into the recording?
No, and it will not.
None of the ketchup bottling or shake weighting made it in there.
Man, if people that are at home listening could only see what we start talking about, I don't know.
It's the reason we started podcasting in the first place, right?
That's right. That's true.
Shake weights, yeah. That's why we started this whole thing.
We're all working on our biceps.
We're a shake weight team, and we wanted to take our shake weighting to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So
looking for sponsorship and making sure that the sponsor is the right fit.
Doing it for the sponsor of my race car.
That's right.
That's what she said.
There's that NASCAR that was sponsored by the baby's butt cream, Boudreaux's butt paste. Like, wow. I mean, yeah.
No shame.
No shame. Hey, sometimes you got to pay the bills, you know.
However you can make money.
That's right. Racing is expensive, and to afford racing, you need money. So.
You say so.
Yeah, I don't know. So,
what podcast number are we on now? What is this?
This is, I think this is 29.
Nice.
Dang.
Real quick. I think that's right.
We're reaching adulthood.
I'm not an adult.
No more good years left. This is our Saturn return. This is our
29.
Saturn return podcast.
Yeah.
Saturn return?
Yeah, you never heard of that?
That's deep. That's a deep cut, Ryan.
No, I've not heard of that. Man, all right. Well, you guys ready? Shall we officially kick this thing off?
Yeah, I think we're kicked off.
All right.
Where's our ABCS at?
He is sitting this out. Yeah.
He didn't want me to call him out on his scope creep.
That's true. That's true. We've had a lot of scope creep going around lately. So yeah, spoilers, but that's one of the topics for today. But welcome back to everybody who's listening. This is episode 29 of the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. We've got the usual suspects are back here. We've got Dustin from DSX Motorsports.
Dustin?
Dustin?
What's up, Dustin?
Dussex.
My brother's on here?
Dussex.
Oh, yeah.
Your
Surprise!
brother's name is
Ryan.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, this guy. And then we got Scotty from the shop. Nigel from the shop is here. WX Buddy. And then we've got Tasso from OTC Racing. And we kind of been catching up a little bit, but we haven't had just the normal crew on for a while. So maybe there is a little bit of catching up that we should do before we kind of dive into a topic. Because, I mean, so Tasso, you actually were out running Lemons. So,
yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about that. And then Dussex, I think you've done 2 races since we last kind of.
I think the last one was NCM that I did with Grid Life.
Okay. Man, yeah, you do a lot of races.
I can totally get us from here to our eventual topic of scope creep.
Yes.
But it's going to seem like we're not going to get there. So you got to stick with it.
All right. Well, all right, Tasso, take us down this winding path. Let's hear it.
So, I mean, I'll talk about the Lemons thing first, and I also want to hear about Scotty. You just did some good work at NASA, right, with your time attack stuff? So
yeah.
I want to hear about that. It's as far as I know, the first time you've driven your new aero package, right? Or at least competed with it. Is that true?
Yeah, but that track's not really a good representation of exactly what the car can do. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's for the most part a roval with a couple pretty slow speed turns on the infield. So Pueblo's coming up in 2 weeks. We'll see how the aero works there.
Yeah. So I want to hear more about that in a second.
Well, now hold on. Let's. I hate to say it, but we do have to pause. Scotty, there's a special guest here for you. Pettiford.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So hold on 1 second. Hold on. Right. Sorry about that. Well, let's jump back into it. So Tasso, you're saying that you've got a project, and you were going to kind of take us down a path.
Well, sure.
towards
So
Scope
first
Creep.
I'll talk about, I was out. I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast yet or not, but Scotty was asking about it. And I'm always happy to talk about things I've been doing. So
Yeah.
I was out in Sonoma for a Lemons race. I've got an old friend. I've lived with him on and off over the years and stuff. And he and his brother have put together a pretty wild Miata. It's got a Cadillac HT 4100, the 4.9 Cadillac from the transverse front wheel drive, era.
Mhm.
So it's got a V8 Cadillac motor in it and all sorts of crazy stuff going on. It's wide body. It's got a Geo Metro hatch grafted onto it for a hardtop. It has decent aero actually and Mustang hubs and brakes, like old, SVT hubs and brakes and stuff like that. And so it's a great car. It's never really run that low elevation really. So Sonoma being at sea level was about 5,000 feet lower than it's ever really run.
Wow.
It's on, he's got some sort of tuning software for it. And so we spent all of like the Friday and really into the start of the race trying to figure out, we're hitting some table somewhere in the ECU where at anything above about a third of throttle, where it was pulling like 20 degrees of timing, so it was going, essentially it was firing, out the exhaust and backfiring and heating up the exhaust. And
Oh, wow.
so it was a pain. We never found out what was going on. We tried we're switching distributors and stuff like that and trying different ECUs all together, spares, and couldn't figure it out. So it was frustrating to race with. I mean, like as a driving technique thing, our little mantra was, if you feel like the car should be going faster, try backing off the throttle and seeing if it'll fall back into a part of the map with ignition advance. So we were driving around like that, and even it was hell. So we were going more or less stock Miata speeds with our V8 Miata, which was still fun, right? Fortunately, Sonoma is an amazing track. If you've never been there, not that I'm as much of a circuit hound as some of the other guys that I'm looking at right now on this podcast. It's amazing. Like you need to go there and drive it. The sims or the video games don't do it justice. There's almost constant elevation change. You're almost constantly turning. You have blind turns over a crest that go into like even turn one at the track. It's, if you guys have seen it in video games or whatever, you got your start straight and you kind of go up a hill to the left and then dive back off to the right. That braking zone in our car, because we had a power issue and the brakes are so good on that car, was about 20 feet long. So we're going from our second fastest point on the track to a blind right over crest, completely blind, with just like a right. And so it's fun. It was a really fun track. It was a bummer not to have full power. We're still pulling, oh man, I'm spacing on the lap times now, like a low 210 out of the car, which, look, a lot of the normal racing series track records are like a 150 something. So we weren't too far off for an ailing Lemons car, versus like the spec Miatas and spec whatevers and SDCA this and that stuff. So still a fun time. We kept fighting, like, because the exhaust would get so hot because of our ignition problem that like half the time we come into the pits, the exhaust, like the header wrap would be on fire and stuff like that. And so we'd spray that, like for our driver changes, we'd come in, spray the exhaust, and then do the driver change and stuff like that. And, power steering was new on the car for the weekend too. It's been a manual steering car up until this last weekend. We blew 2 high pressure lines. So we got to the point we could remake and replace high pressure lines in about 20 minutes in the pit. So we still managed to finish in the top half of the 133 car field or whatever it was. So
Dang.
Damn.
tells
Yeah, that's
you more about like lemons maybe than it does about our weekend. Because we probably had 2 hours of downtime, and ultimately we ended up putting a push rod through a rocker with about 45 minutes to go, and that finished the race for us. And we still haven't. It looks like a valve contacted something because there's some bent valves now since we've taken the motor apart. But so yeah, fun weekend, lots of problems. It's always fun. I'm from that area, so it's always fun to get back to where I grew up. And these are tracks too, Sonoma and Laguna Seca that I've ridden bikes at. Like they have mountain bike races there over the years. They ran a mountain bike national championships at Sonoma of all places one year. It was weird, but nonetheless, it was cool to go back there and race cars. So yeah. I can't recommend the track enough. Even in an ailing car, I'd love to go back with a properly healthy car and I can't express to you like the weird G-forces that track generates in terms of just like this carousel corner is just so long and so much traction on the exit. You spend you must spend 10 minutes over 1G, turning left. Not 10 minutes, 10 seconds or something like that, right? It's a crazy long high grip. It's fun. It's a fun track. So I recommend it to everyone. The Lemons culture out on the West Coast too is a lot more aggressive than, the other Lemons I've done is at High Plains in Colorado. So, there was a lot of dicing and, it was more than twice the entrance that you get in a Colorado race and a track that's not that much longer than High Plains. So constant traffic, and which is I always really enjoy, like for the folks that go to go-kart tracks and they're like, oh, I never got my fast lap because there was always some jamoke slowing me down. I don't care. I like dealing with it. I would rather be dicing it up with traffic the whole time than see what I could do.
Sure.
It's every once in a while it's fun to see what you can do, but it was fun. We were doing, because we had no power, our fuel mileage was amazing, and that car already does like an hour and a half stint at race pace, so we were on like 3-hour stints.
God.
As I was in the pits, so 3 hours of not only managing an ECU and a throttle pedal that's trying to fight you,
right,
but also dicing it up on a track like that almost constant side loading was a lot of fun. I can't recommend it. It was so much fun. So, yeah, that Lemons car is not really a Miata. It's kind of a sort of a Miata. I mean, we call it.
It looks like a Miata if you squint enough.
Not even, man.
Not
it's but right. So it's I'm like, man, I'm sold on wheel-to-wheel racing. All of the competition I've done other than these Lemons races is kind of the time trial style of hill climbing, or stage rally, which is its own time trial format. So, like, what do I do to get into wheel to wheel? I looked at Lucky Dog, looked at building a Lemons car of my own, all this kind of stuff, and then into my lap fell a Miata. It was like $300. It's got no title. It has a lot of dents. The windshield is basically broken out by hail. So I have an aero advantage coming right off the bat. So I paid a little extra for that aero advantage. And it's at this point then, I'm thinking spec Miata. We had a little bonus on our last podcast. I don't know if anyone, it's probably not even posted yet. So maybe before this one goes up, but after we're recording this one, you can see I had a little talk with Victor and everybody about, like what I should do with the car, and I was already playing with spec Miata for a direction, and so I think I'm more settled on it now. I still I don't know, probably about a half hour before hopping on for this podcast, I went through maybe I should V8 swap it, but so those urges are becoming fewer and further between. So I guess that means I'm settling into a thing, and maybe the scope creep won't be so bad, but
yeah.
But so yeah, it's I've been hitting up all the classifieds for parts, and it was a stripped shell. It sort of had seats in it. I don't know why they weren't bolted down, and they're in horrible shape. There was probably 2 inches of just grime and leaves and shit just in the passenger footwell area of the shell, and so I spent a while scraping all that stuff out, and it's missing the dash harness, but it came with a dash and like a steering rack.
Some wiring.
Some wiring. It's on
Some stuff.
4 donuts.
Something.
But so, I've put together now a transmission, a rear diff, the missing harnesses, the steering column itself was bent. So got one of those. And so I'm in about $1,000 now, and all I'm short is a motor and a cage and then the spec suspension stuff and some wheels and tires. So,
Wow.
but still it's one of those things where even picking a spec class, the scope creep has been real, because I'm like, man, I could just optimize that, or there's a lot of stuff, even for being a really controlled class, you're allowed to eliminate the cruise control system. And it's well, yeah, so I just unbolt the little pot that pulls on the cable, right? But then what do you classify as a system, and what can you do to optimize? There's, so many. You're not even allowed to strip harnesses in this class. You can't take harnesses apart and pull out those wiring, right? But it's, what parts of the cruise control linkage then do I count as the system? And so I've been poring over, the old forums and websites and stuff for what has been done, what has been protested in the past, what has been protested and approved, and so, it's a lot of that stuff right now. And, my initial goals, and I've been talking to, Ryan as more or less a representative now of NASA about getting started with NASA and what that whole process is going to be like for competition licensing and stuff like that. And so it's an exciting new thing. And I'm, what day is it today? Friday. So I'm 7 days away from going to my first hill climb for the season as well. So it's,
wow.
And I still have, that car's been sitting there good to go, but little things, I got to clean the windows and adjust the throttle cable is a little loose right now and stuff like that on the hill climb car. So it's plenty of stuff going on.
A lot of directions going.
Yeah.
For racing.
But it's a good time.
Nice.
So,
well, before we really dive into the scope creep, let's catch up with DSX and Scotty, because there was just an event at PPIR, and then DSX. Maybe just kind of give us a quick overview about what your experience was like at NCM.
Yeah, so we did NCM Grid Life with the super tight car, and I was instructing. And Jeanette was also co-driving the car in DE3, or their advanced DE. The car was great. We went out there hoping to run a 2:16.9, kind of as a baseline of whether or not I bring the car back for a competition with SCCA time trials. And we were able to get down to a 2:16.5 or something like that. Pretty happy with that, considering the car only gets 2 to 3 laps out of the fuel cell. We had to end up running one of the tires literally to where it was corded because of the tire machine situation, and was kind of up in the air. So we brought 2 tires with us, and we were able to get them mounted between the Saturday and Sunday. And that helped out a ton. But the car was that track is so cool, because it's one of those tracks where if you can get one turn right, then the next turn builds on top of that, and the next turn builds on top of that. It really feels like you're in a video game where you're 2 times, 3 times, 4 times bonuses. And that car just had so much grip. You're just driving into some of these turns, just holding on for dear life and hoping that it would make it. But the car did great. The brakes were great. The tires were great. I think, and we don't have the fancy front bumper, but even still with the stock flappy bumper we put on it, held up fine. And the car was flawless all weekend. I drove it all the time attack sessions. Jeanette drove it all the DE sessions, there's even more of those in our time attack sessions. And then I also used it for a couple lead follows. So it was kind of funny. I think the funniest thing about the lead follows is that there's this tiny little yellow Subaru. I was leading a 350R Cobra and a big body Challenger. And I'm trying to like right hand point to these guys what's going on, because you're doing like the hand signals and stuff. And it's so weird to do that from the right hand side of the car versus the left hand side. But overall, I mean, the car was fast. We're going to take it back to NCM in about a month and see how it does at Nationals. There's already 5 or 6 guys, including an Ariel Adam, registered for NCM for Unlimited 2. So it's going to be tough, but hopefully we can go back and win the Unlimited 2 title for this season.
Very cool.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Well, and so Scotty, let's talk about your outing. You took your car out for the first time since the off season, where you did a whole bunch of stuff, which is something where we probably will have to go through in detail all the changes that you made to the car, because there were a lot. But that was the first time out, and so how did that go?
I mean, the car feels good. PPAR is, I mean, I did a lot of aero upgrades, and it's not really a good place to like actually feel how well the aero is working. But
Sure.
All in all, I mean, the car just felt amazing. Really fun weekend. Set a new personal best. Got within about a second and a half of the TT lap record. And I mean, the best part about it was the new NASA TT head guy, the guy who's in charge of it all, Mr. Ryan Dusek there. I mean, he basically changed up the way that NASA Rocky Mountain is running their time trial sessions, and it made a huge improvement over, the past few years, where you had road racers that were running time trials sessions who didn't really care, I guess was the best way to put it. So Ryan made some changes with just basically the layout, splitting it up into 2 sessions, basically kind of a fast group and a slow group for the runners. And as we move forward throughout the season, it's just going to keep getting better and better. Way less traffic out there. You're not coming up on like the TT 4, 5, 6 guys, and we were running with the DE4 guys also. So there's a lot less time discrepancies, I guess, between all the drivers out there. Like, everyone in the fast group was pretty damn fast. I mean, what was it like within 2 to 3 seconds of everyone?
Yeah. And the top like 7 or 8 drivers, were within 3 seconds of each other.
Yeah. So I mean,
at this track. Yeah.
And I think it's going to be that way, for the rest of the season. So yeah, I mean, Pueblo's in 2 weeks, and really get a good idea on if I built the car right, if I knew what I was doing. Yeah.
Well, and just real quick, is kind of what was your lap time? What was your previous best, and what were you able to do this past weekend?
104.1 was my previous best, and I got down to a 101.5 something.
It's a lot of improvement there, which is
How
awesome.
How were like your top speed at the end of the Roval?
Honestly, about the same, like 120. So one thing I realized about that track, I mean, I really only driven it at the Grid Life events. They don't start till 10 o'clock in the afternoon in the middle of summer. By that time, I think the surface temperature gets really hot. And I think as the surface temperature gets hot, the grip just goes away. So, I mean, I was just kind of struggling to get those 104s before. Dusek went out on a like 35-degree day and set his fastest lap time at a 101.5 something. And what I realized first thing in the morning, that track has a ton of grip. And I mean, a ton, because not changing anything with the car from that morning session where I ran a 101.5, the next session, like a 101 or 103 something, so I mean, automatically just 2 seconds slower right off the bat.
You're feeling that in grip? That's not like the car running cooler and making better power or something? Like
no, it's grip. You can feel the car start to push. So yeah, and again, I mean, it's a super fun track. like we went and actually walked the track. Desick showed us a couple of the lines. You know, I made some adjustments in suspension. And go ahead.
With better aero, does the dip feel less scary or what?
No, not at all. But I mean, so Ryan actually let this kid, he blew up his Fiesta on the first day out there. And so Ryan let him drive the Taikou car. And he went out and ran like a 102 something. And he came in and he was just like, yeah, I'm doing 115 through the dip. And me and Ryan were both like, you're what? You're like, bullshit. Bring up your data. And sure enough, like, so I'm doing like 100 through the dip. I think Ryan was doing like 104, 105. And this kid was literally doing 115 miles an hour through the dip. So there's a second probably, you know, just of like puckering up, being really afraid of, you know, unsettling the car too much. But with his, you know, highly sprung as that Taikou car is, and him going that fast through it, it's like, okay, I mean, it's definitely possible.
Still time to find out there, but it was a big
There
improvement.
is. Yeah.
So how far off the record are you now?
Like 1.7 seconds at that track.
Man. You got that.
Well, and I mean, I had brand new Hoosier A7s. It's possible that it could have been just that, you know, because that's what the lap record was set on, was A7s. And I'm on old R7s right now. So, I mean, it's possible. I don't know.
Yeah, man.
We'll see when we go back.
Yes.
Yeah. I probably missed it, but I mean, a big part of this track too is the infield and getting to work. Like me and Scotty worked over the data and combed over the lines and everything till we got down to like, all right, this is the line to try.
Yeah, I mean, there's some little tricks that Ryan found, and then he found another one at the end of the day on Sunday that I'm kind of interested to really try, like hooking inside tires on the inside of the curbs and like letting that slingshot you around, you know. And there's just like maybe there's absolutely no grip
move.
I mean,
you guys just wish you were racing on the dirt, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think more of like why is my mind blank? The anime Initial D where he hooks the tires on the insides, you know, the mountain passes.
Yep.
And that's paved, Tasso, not on dirt.
Yeah, but I heard it against them. It's all right.
Same tricks. Same tricks.
I'm an asphalt guy now too, so I hear you. Those dirt guys have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Amateurs.
Well, very cool. Yeah, curious how Pueblo goes, and like once you get to a more open track, so you can really kind of play with all the aero changes that you made and see where it all shakes out and how much of a difference you made. Because, I mean everything is different, especially on the back of the car.
Turn one at Pueblo is going to tell a lot. It's a huge, it's a descending radius where, I mean, my car was only getting up to about 125, but you basically enter it at 125, trail braking, actually let the tires scrub the speed for you as the turn gets tighter. But I think with this extra aero, I'm going to be able to maintain a hell of a lot more speed there. So I'm really excited to go try it out.
It's going to be fun.
When is that?
2 weeks.
In like 3 weeks, 2 weeks. Yeah.
2 weeks.
22nd, 23rd, I think.
Yep.
Right.
Of June.
That's the one.
Of May.
Of May.
Of May.
It's May, John.
Really?
I'll put it in my calendar.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on anymore. It's been one of those days, man.
Of 2021, just in case anyone's curious.
Yeah.
Really, man. There's some things I should probably do, I think. Okay, well let's now that we've kind of caught up, let's dive into the topic that we kind of bounced around and wanted to talk about, which is budget and scope creep. And we've got Nigel up here. And Nigel, we haven't said anything yet.
I see him over there. Can't stay quiet on this one.
That's right. But Nigel was a big inspiration behind this, and you kind of had the lead in from Tasso about where he's run into this. Man, we've all run into this at time to time. I'm looking at making some suspension changes to my WRX, and it's like if you have a budget, like, I mean, you kind of have to have a budget when you're going to start a project, or if you're going to try and change something out, you've got to kind of have a little, some guidelines as far as, well, how big of a reach monetarily are you going to make, and what gains or changes you're going to get for that investment. But then
You know,
once you
so
start down this path,
you can start there, but then you just have to throw it all away.
yeah. So
You
all right.
throw that, and did you all your planning and your budget, you just throw that all away because of scope creep.
That's
So
right.
so Nigel, let's kind of talk through what started all of this to happen, and then bring us up to speed of where you're at currently.
Okay. So what started this was you guys looking at the dyno sheet for my race car and being appalled at the at how tiny the power band was.
I would honestly say this started out with an intervention. That's really how this ball got rolling.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was I make full boost at 5,800 RPM and red lines at 72. So 1,400 RPM of power band.
Yeah. Way late, and nothing below that.
And nothing below that. I mean, it was like 100 horsepower, and then all of a sudden it hits right at 5,800.
Yeah.
So then the whole initial plan was, well, just swap the turbo and get a new tune and go out and see what happens.
Right.
But that's obviously not how any of this is continued. Because the first thought there is, okay, you're making more power. Can the rest of your car handle, more power? And
well, and to be fair, at the start, the goal wasn't even to make more power. It was just to get the same power, but over a much wider RPM range.
Right. But that started the conversation of, can the car handle even that amount of power, but more?
Yeah.
And largely we decided no, because I was already going through 5-speed transmissions like crazy. I went through 3 in a year. So.
And you should also say, I mean, you weren't making a ton of power even once the turbo that you had came on.
Right. So the peak power I was making was 319. So it would jump from like 100, 150. There's 300, and it was a beautiful plateau at 319 until the red line.
Right.
For 1,400 RPM.
1,400 RPM. The
Are you willing to share what turbo you were on? Or is that like a, hey, let's protect the manufacturer kind of thing?
No, it was my setup. The way that I built the car was just bad. It was a Tomei MX 7960.
So very large stock location. I think Tomei's largest stock location.
It is. It's the biggest stock location turbo I could get, basically. And the idea was to make around 400 horsepower and then bring it back. The problem is that with the cams and injectors and everything that I had done to the car, I could make that power, but it wouldn't come on until like 6 or 7. And then the car would have to rev out because it was super nice. Like the plateau just kept going, and at redline, it never did. So
worth mentioning, very aggressive cams as well.
Yeah. So if I had let the car run out really high in the red line, which I didn't want to do for like reliability purposes, then the power may have been there for a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
So in looking at everything, we wanted to bring it back down to what was reasonable for my goals. Like, okay, I want to make 330 horsepower, which is 10 more than I had, but I want to make it, let's say 1,000 RPM earlier or 2,000 RPM earlier.
Even the 2,000 RPM is definitely doable, for sure.
Yeah. But then that grew into, okay, I'm already killing 5 speeds. We need to get a 6-speed in there so that I can handle that amount of power.
Right.
Also, I was running like well, I didn't even know because I don't pay attention to these kinds of things, but I was running the stock 2-liter oil pan. So then I was like, I'm running everything stock in the oiling system, everything stock in like the cooling system. It was, I don't know what I'm doing. So
You did have some cooling issues a couple of years ago, right? Or last year, whenever you were running it really hard last time?
yeah, we had massive cooling issues. I did sort those out. We had a fan shroud on the back of the radiator, pulled that off, and everything was fine. It was just an airflow over the radiator issue. So yeah, then this grew into like, okay, well now I'm going to get a new oil pan and pickup, and then I need to do the turbo. I need to do the
Fueling
transmission.
Fueling
Yes.
system.
What it turned into is all of us being like, oh, well, if you're going to do this, then you better do this. And what about this?
Well,
and
you
this,
should really
and this,
do
and this.
I
And this.
fired the car up once over the winter, or I fired it up like every couple of weeks, but one time when I fired it up over the winter, one of the fuel rails just started pouring fuel all over the top of the motor.
Oh, gosh.
Right.
And we were like, oh, you have the factory O2 fuel rails. They're known to do that, after age and it gets cold. Cool. I guess it's a recall that had never been done on this car.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, now I'm changing the fuel rails. I have to do the injectors. I'm just going to go all out and get a whole new fuel system and get rid of the hard lines and go parallel, get a regulator. And now it's like, okay, well, you have to take the intake manifold off to do all of this stuff. I'm running the Cosworth intake manifold and a front mount intercooler. Why not rotate it?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Go down that path. So we start going down that path and find out that it doesn't work. It could possibly work on a bug eye, but you're going to have to cut a hole in the hood for the throttle body to stick out of.
Mainly because in this issue was you still have the drive-by cable throttle, but with a spacer to adapt to drive-by-wire bolt pattern on the Cosworth. So the throttle body sticks out like an extra centimeter, and it's not a flat.
Well, the spacer is about an inch.
Okay, yeah.
And then because the Cosworth, the angle of it actually comes out at like a 45-degree angle. It's not flat. So if we had like a Process West intake manifold, I think it would work. But I don't really want to get rid of my Cosworth intake manifold.
Right. And at this point, like there's just now so many things up in the air and so many things that are changing. The scope creep was real or is real.
Well, and then it's like, okay, now do we want to run like, we had to run a spacer. When you flip, because the Cosworth intake manifold is at that crazy angle, we had to run a taller spacer to fit the turbo inlet underneath it. I mean, everything just kept like adding up and adding up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tried to get you just to get a drive-by-wire ECU and during the full.
Okay. So let's go down that path for a second. Let's go down that path. I was like, okay, sure. I'm also looking at getting an STI transmission. It would be great to have STI hubs. I'm getting like the STI drive shaft. I want to get the rear diff, the R180 diff. Why not just buy an STI? Why start with a WRX and then try to convert it into an STI with all these one by one parts? Because that's a huge process and that takes so much time and effort. I went out and looked at an STI because I was like, I found somebody selling one for what I thought was a reasonable price. And I was like, for this price, it would be easier to just get this car and then turn that into my race car. So in the middle of all this process, the engine's apart on my race car. It's up on stands in the garage. And then I go out to look at an STI an hour away to start another project, which ended up being not the right fit for me. But I am still looking for STIs because I have another chassis waiting to be built on because this current one is like so rusty and old and decrepit.
This is what brought this in is like, man, this is a topic worth discussing. I think we've all been there to certain degrees. I think Nigel, you have taken it to a new level by like, but I mean, I'm sure we've all kind of come close to this before, but yeah, getting
I
halfway
almost
through and
bought a
deciding like,
second
hey,
prototype.
I'm just gonna start over and build a whole nother race car because maybe that'll be easier.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a lot.
Now your blue car, the one that it's in question, it's already got a welded in 4-point roll bar, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I have all the tubes to make it a full cage. But again, it's just one of those things like, is it worth it? Is it worth it to do on that shell? So I kind of disagree with John's opening point about having a budget. You can't have a budget, because if I'm looking at the things I want to do for my car, I'm like, aim for the sky, do everything like that I want to do to it. All that stuff is way too expensive for me to afford, but I want to do it, so I'm going to do it. You can't, if I look at it and say I have a budget of $1,000 for suspension, I'm going to get not the good suspension that I actually want. And then as soon as I put that on the car, there's nothing else I can do. I can't do any supporting mods for it. So looking at the 6-speed swap, I was like, okay, I can find a transmission fairly cheap. That's great. It's not the only thing you have to do. I have to do all the supporting mods. We still have to figure out the wiring for like the DCCD, the DSSP, like all of that stuff continues to grow. And then even once we start working on the car, we're like, hey, did you notice that your throwout bearing was missing one of the ears on the side? We have to replace that just because we found that in the middle of the process. Like,
You're always going to find something. I mean, whenever you're working on a cart, especially as it gets older, I mean, you're always going to find something.
yeah,
Like all the rust that you posted pictures of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the inspiration for that. Was like, okay, but there's so many new parts on this car. It's a Cosworth block that's built 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Everything on that car that I've put on it is less than 2 years old, but you're putting it on a chassis that's now 20 years old.
Right.
And so I'm still finding things like the tie rod ends. Those were brand new 7-9 months ago, but they're connected to the rustiest piece on the entire car.
The outer tie rods are brand new, but the inner tie rods are some of the worst I've ever seen.
I think what you're doing, you're discovering a market for billet chassis now too, because you can get a billet block, billet transmission.
Why not a
Just get
billet chassis?
Billet chassis.
Mm-hmm.
Just CNC'd out of one 40-ton block of aluminum. I don't know what.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I mean, why not, right?
Well, I mean, and Tasso, like what you told us about the Miata and getting a shell and wanting to build into a spec. I mean, you said the same thing. The scope is starting to build, and like when you were trying to think about maybe not doing a spec Miata build and going like putting a V8 in it, as you said.
Yeah, right.
All of a sudden, it just starts to kind of spiral out of control. It seems.
I mean, I'm in the Miata crowd now for like 3 weeks or something like that. I almost accidentally bought my second strip shell last week.
Oh, man.
I know that exact feeling.
You and Nigel,
I need it, right? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I bought a shell for $500 because it has a transmission in it. Because again, I needed the transmission.
Right. I mean, this one has a title, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's more than my existing car has, so that's cool, I guess. You know, not saying I'm going to do sketchy stuff, but you know, shit, it doesn't even roll, this one, but it was $100 shell. So I mean, It's got more than $100 in quarter panels on it. I mean, whatever.
It's Rubbins Racing, you might need those quarter panels.
Right. I mean, this is something I talk to, like when I'm trying to justify my projects to Abby all the time. My rule of thumb is to at least double the budget and triple the time that I expect to spend on it, and that's just my starting point, right? Like, so I'm just doing, I don't know what, a rear diff. I'm gonna say, okay, I need $1,000 of parts. I'm gonna budget $2,500 for this, and it's gonna take me a month to get it done. And then the next thing I know, I'm in 10 grand. It's 2 years later. I'm in a whole different race series.
Right.
Like, I don't know. It's
no budget. Don't ever start with a budget.
Well, and where this comes up, in our daily work here, quite often, from what I've seen, is in engine builds, because a lot of times people get kind of blinders on for a block. They want a short block. They want to build the engine. They know kind of what their end goal is, and they just get fixated on the short block itself. And they start thinking, well, I need to make 400 horsepower. I really would like to make 550, but maybe I could get a block that'll support 800 to 900 horsepower. And then they start like fixating on that, and then they spend their entire budget on a block that's built way beyond what they actually needed or even maybe wanted at the start. And then, by the way, machine shop called and your heads are trashed. You have to start over again. Well, but I spend all the money on the short block. Well, I mean.
So then they wait a couple paychecks and it builds up, and then they get heads. And then they come back and their tuner says, oh, you don't have enough fuel pump for this.
Yep.
And then they wait a couple paychecks and they get a fuel pump or a surge tank or something like that. And then, the way it goes.
I mean, that's exactly why I never have a budget with anything, because I literally had that exact same problem.
Sure.
I brought my motor in, brand new short block, and was like, okay, here's everything I have that used to be on the car. And they were like, yeah, these heads can't be used again. You need blank heads. And okay, cool. So now you're buying brand new blank heads, filling them with brand new parts. You can't reuse anything from those old heads if I'm trying to make any sort of power over stock. And then my first track day event, I'd never pushed the car hard enough to experience the fuel starve. So I came back and was like, okay, now I need a surge tank. You just you don't know until you know.
Right.
But like, definitely, I think even with research, experience is key, because you can say, well, you look at every piece of research and you get differing. Well, I never needed a surge tank on this build, and here's what I'm doing. Like, okay, what tires did you have? How stressed was the engine in that other situation? Like, it's so much learning as you go, and you have to kind of expect to pay to continue learning.
I'm a broken record now on these podcasts, but again, it's why I think it's so important to build those relationships with your local race shop, because you're not just making friends, you're tapping into a reservoir of those experiences, like it's, or listen to our podcast for more of those things, and you'll get it for free. All you got to do is tune in.
Truly, I mean, it's one of the inspirations to try and have these conversations that maybe you're having with your buddies at 2:00 in the morning, and it's as much of a I don't know, trying to bounce ideas around as much as like a support group. Like, oh man, I'm in this thing. Like, where do I go? How do I navigate this problem? Because I mean, it just comes up all the time.
It's also an argument for like keeping stock power and just going out and doing the thing you want to do.
Nah.
Well,
but it's a waste of money if you build up a car and you can never go out and drive it or do the thing that you intended to do with it. Like, if your goal is to just make a horsepower number, then make the horsepower number. That's fine. You're still going to run into scope creep making that horsepower number, because now you need bigger injectors and a bigger fuel pump, and you're going to switch to the 85. Okay. Are you running a flex fuel map? Like, all that kind of stuff just continues to add up if you want to just hit a horsepower number. If all you want to do is go to the track and get seats on, you shouldn't also be trying to hit a horsepower number and also you know what I mean?
Get a Miata.
No.
No.
Never.
Well,
Never.
And the thing, I think, so like, if you don't have a budget, but you don't have unlimited funds, then
you have to do the work yourself,
or accept that it's going to like take however long it takes to fund the build to get to the point. So I think where we get ourselves
goals.
Yeah. The worst situation I've seen where things really get stressful is, kind of like the engine example, like pretty much what you just laid out, Nigel, where you drop off your engine, you've got the short block, everything's going to be fine. oh, your engine that we're replacing this with is way more damaged. You actually need X number of parts. But now your car is in a shop on a lift, taken apart, not going to be an easy path necessarily to maybe just push it out and bring it back in 2 months when you're ready. Now you're on a time constraint to get the shop the parts that they need to get the car back together again so you can get it off their lift or something along those lines. Like if you're not aware of the possibility of how bad a project can spiral and you're on a tight time constraint, and again, you don't have unlimited funds, this can be a path for like some I don't know, a lot of stress and a lot of swearing.
It's real bad form too. Like I know from friends that have shops, they deal with this all the time. And a lot of times guys are like, oh, well, I got to wait, like I've been saying, for a couple of paychecks to get those heads, right? Can you just hang on to it? And the shop's like, no, man, we're not a car storage place, like it's bad form to treat shops like that. And they get treated like that all the time. And they get salty. And then someone has a bad experience and it just becomes like a negative spiral. And it's no good. Like it's part of being respectful to the industry and to the shops to know that your project will likely be bigger than you think it is and to be ready for it. So you're not wasting their time or their space, like these people are working their asses off to make ends meet. They can't just sit on your project as you wait and they're just out. I mean, they make a lot of their money on labor cost, right? And so they're just out that money until eventually you pay for it when you pick your project up. And if you're months and months later when you pick your project up, then they're essentially just giving you that labor on credit until you eventually pay for it. But they're still paying rent. They're still paying their bills. They're still paying their employees, whether or not you've paid them yet. And so it's a big problem. I don't mean to be going on a crusade here for shops, but it's just a lack of respect for these guys that are the bread and butter of the industry. If you're doing that kind of stuff to a shop, if it's your friend and you're going and helping at the shop or whatever, then obviously there's different situations, right? But if you're just saying, hey, here's some stuff, I'll pay you when it's done, and they're like, hey, you need some more stuff, and you go, oh, well, I got to save up for it, then the right thing to do is to pay them for their time, get your shit out of their yard, and bring it back when you're ready, right? So,
well, and part of that research that I was talking about before you go into a project, like kind of knowing what to expect, does include talking to the shops that's going to work on your car and like, here's my goals, here's what I'm going to bring you, what can I expect out of this? Like I went in knowing that the 2-liter heads had a problem with cracking around the spark plugs. Like I went in with that expectation, you might have a huge charge for brand new blank heads. Okay, cool. I didn't bring my car in and then have him say, okay, now here's all the stuff we're going to look at. It was all tried to be taken care of beforehand, and that's part of the research of it. And it's tough to like cover all your bases, especially if you're like me and you have no idea what you're doing or you've never driven a car before. But
there's a lot of unknowns, and you don't know until you tear everything down.
Well, and that's a lot of the customers we deal with are just like the horsepower number. This is what I want. But they do absolutely no research on any of the other supporting mods or complications that they could run into. They're just like, this is what I want. And I mean, you definitely run into a lot of issues when you just when you don't know what you don't know. Right? I just want this power.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, I mean, I would say, maybe if you're on any kind of a constrained timeline, picking any one component that is close to maxing out your budget or that puts you just over the max of what you really have that you can put at the project, I mean, that might be something where either you need to expand your timeline or go with an option that's less affordable so that your funds are not completely tapped out by making one choice that takes up the lion's share of your funds, so that you can make sure that you've got 10, 20, 40% cushion to so that you have some funds to take care of all these ancillary things you're going to find as you go through a car. Especially if you've had an engine failure, if you've had a catastrophic failure, there's no way to know how far sweeping the damage is until you take everything apart. If you're working on an old car, like a a 2-liter WRX. I mean, at this point, the newest one, the very newest one, is 16 years old. You don't know how much you're going to run into, like hoses. Like all your vacuum hoses are rock solid. You need to replace all of them. How much does that cost? Yeah, $150, $200. It's not crazy, but if you've maxed out your budget because you got the biggest turbo you could afford and the biggest engine you could afford, even a $200 surprise expense can be, something that now
when
you
I
have
have
to
a
juggle with.
engine failure, I count on everything under the hood might have to be replaced.
Sure.
So
I mean, that's how 3 of my engines were. Everything had to be replaced, right? Turbo, heads, valve train, everything.
yeah, intercooler, oil coolers, the whole timing set, everything. Like it's yeah. But there's another factor of this too that I was just sitting here thinking of. It's the secret, I think, of motorsports is that every single one of us competing in a motorsport wishes we had time or money to finish one more project before we got there. But we still go out there and race with it. At the number of times I'm like, man, I really wish I had time to get that fuel pump done. Well, I'm not going to have quite what I thought I had, right? But that's about getting out there. Yeah, the scope creep, you have to live with it to an extent, right? To some extent, you need to get the fuel into the cylinder.
Yeah.
But you're always going to be wishing one of these things was more optimized, but you still got to go out there and race. Otherwise, you could spend your entire life in the garage just trying to get stuff optimized before you get out there,
That's what I was saying about the goals, right? Like, if your goal is to have a 600 horsepower car and go to the track and race a full season and set a bunch of records, like, bring those down into a realistic place unless you have unlimited funds and time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's that old saying, how do you make a small fortune in racing? You start with a large one.
Mm-hmm.
And like the loftier the goals are, I mean, you can just burn through money. I mean, it's, we've done it. We've seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Ryan definitely knows that. I mean, the level of scope creep on Ryan's build also is, I mean, it's basically on hold right now.
Yeah, the blue car for sure. Yeah. But that car started as like a car like Nigel's, a 5-speed car with just like a stage 2, tune, and it's turned into a mostly fiberglass body 315. I mean, just stupid in the course of a couple of years. But there was also a lot of racing in there too, to like both Nigel and Tasso's point. But I mean, even talking about engine failures and all the things that go wrong, and then the time constraints, like we had that one engine let go at Pueblo, and we had like a week and a half to figure something out before 3 races on the East Coast that I already paid for. Right. So like, this shit is crazy.
Yeah.
Not a cheap bill.
No. But I mean, to your credit, you found a solution and you made most of that work, if not all of it.
Yeah.
But it was challenge. It was a lot of stress. And like to kind of in that situation, you're on a very tight timeline, and where you're at now with the car, now because you've got the Super Tycoon car, now the timeline really does not have a finite endpoint. And so now that's where now you can take your time with it. And I think I guess to Nigel's point, you have the goal, you know what you want the blue car to be. And because now you don't have the ability to make it happen fast, you're so close, but you just want to keep that goal solid. Like the goal has not changed. So now it's like, okay, well, I would much rather have this take 6 more months, but have it come out the way that I want it to be versus like, let's cut corners. Because I guess maybe that's the other part of this conversation that we should have is cutting corners.
Yeah.
Making less than optimal decisions to either fit within budget or within time, and then what kind of impact that can have, because that is not insignificant.
I mean, you talk about deadlines and stuff, I mean, and the time it takes to do things. Like I have definitely thrown a lot of stuff together on the car and tight time frames to try and make specific things. But and the opposite is like the route that Scotty took. We're just going to do like a basic cage and do some basic weight reduction, and then like 1,000 hours and a whole
9 months
season
later.
You
missed
have
a whole season.
that you're getting back into. So I mean, I mean, just like even Tasso was saying, there's a lot of times you'll go out like, damn, I wish I had done that one last thing, but I mean, I'm here now, so we're doing it, you know? And I mean, that's how the end of my season was last year with the blue car. Like, cool, well, the car runs. I can only turn the wheel this much before it hits the fender. I guess I'll cut it out when I get there. You know, it's just crazy shit that you almost don't even know, like, even like Nigel was saying, like, you don't even know sometimes what things that you didn't do or you should have done until you even get there.
Until you're right there. Yeah, dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and kind of to your build, Nigel, I mean, as far as the shortcuts go, we talked about, okay, well, just put the turbo on. You could put the turbo on, get the car tuned, keep the 5-speed transmission, and that would be fine. It's just you're going to have the ability and everything else is in place to make 400 horsepower, but you're just going to have to keep the target low. And then you made the comment of like, well, maybe we'll just turn it up and see if the transmission holds, just so we can see what the engine can really do, and then deal with the transmission if it should happen. But then, you know, we got to talking. You went through 3 transmissions in your last race season. Like, okay, well, now you know that you can make 400, but you've got the map at 320. Which map are you going to load up when you're actually, you know, in the heat of the moment on the track, like getting ready to go to the event? Like, how many times are you going to roll that dice that you have now made this compromise on that might take you out of an event?
Yeah.
And conversely, would it blow up on the dyno if we try it?
Yeah.
Will they blow up? I mean, will a 5-speed blow up in like 4th gear pulls on the dyno?
Yes. Well,
and
you got to remember too, like, this is not a fully gone through rebuilt with new components transmission either. This is
that's true too.
This is the mystery box that has 150,000 miles on it, maybe. That is kind of going into the car.
Run in, you're good.
Well, it shows you
can make it 20 more.
Yeah.
If you can buy a whole car and it comes with for just the transmission for $500 or whatever, it might tell you about the transmission. You know, like there is a true mystery. It's the gamble.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes you have to gamble. I mean, we've been in situations where just that's what you've got to do. I mean, like DSX, with your week and a half, if I'm remembering, that was when you put the EJ206 in. Is that right?
Oh shit, we've done all kinds of dumb shit. But the one I'm talking about is when we were basically like, should we? You know, Ryan Payne had reached out. He said, hey, I can do this for you guys, but it's going to take like at least 5 days. And you're like, shit, we got an IAG block in the back, and like, let's put this together. And I think that was like, we spent like half a day brainstorming on what to do. We came in the next day with a big check, and I left with like a whole
engine
drivetrain, a whole engine essentially. And it took me about a week to put it all together and get it tuned.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that was the time I was thinking of. I mean, the 206 was kind of like that, but that was more of like budget constraints. You know, we bought the 206 and then like, all right, here we go. Let's just get this. That was to me less stressful than trying to get the, I think it's because, you know, you go through the process enough times that it's like not that big of a deal, but
it was a complete engine that had, you know, low miles, because all Japanese engines have low miles on them. And just like it should be running. Let's put it in there. Let's just see what happens. And it was in some ways a compromise, but it was the best option at the time. It was a compromise, but it ended up working out quite well, I'd say, for the circumstances.
Yep, absolutely. My best engine to date so far.
It's just
a stock engine.
A stock engine,
Stock engine.
Yeah.
The motor I bought my red car with had probably truly 30,000 race miles on it. Wow. Like actual miles of racing. Not just like, oh, it had this many miles and some of them were race miles. Like it had like 160,000 miles, but probably that many were. And it was great. Like it wasn't, I wasn't asking much of it. It was essentially stage 2 E85, you know? But just it ran and like I didn't even put oil in it. Basically, it just ran.
Just ran.
So, just kept going.
That's the dream right there. If you can just find the same thing that makes 500 horsepower, I mean, pretty much. You're done. That you've won cars.
Drop it.
Just run it, and when it breaks, just hang up the keys. That's it. It's never going to get better than that.
Yeah.
That's what we're all searching for, but none of us have landed that yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I told you guys I bought a Miata.
Really? Tell us more, Tasso. Did not know that.
That's all right. It's a Subaru podcast. So
It's running better
motorsports
than
podcast.
half the Subarus out there, right?
yeah, it has no head gasket problem because it has no motor. So
There's no head gaskets. No head gasket
No
problems
heads.
with no head
Yeah.
gaskets.
There's no burn ring lands because it has no rings or ring lands. So yeah,
Tasso, you might have cracked this problem.
just don't have a car.
Don't have a car.
You're good.
Don't put an engine.
You gotta play to win, So
Well, man,
Yeah.
if anything, this is kind of turned into a support group for motorsports enthusiasts, because I'm sure that as many stories as we've had, I'm sure everybody else has got
about this, comment below
many stories.
with
Yeah.
your stories.
Yep.
Or if you're listening to this podcast in your car, just say it out loud and we'll hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if nothing else, if we've managed to do nothing else, hopefully we've given you a bit of perspective, and maybe if you've not gone down this path before, now you have at least some ideas of things that can happen, and maybe so you'd be a little bit better prepared, or ready for it as it comes and as it happens.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Planning.
It's
Planning
planning.
more than anything. Planning and research, and then you be prepared to spend twice as much and twice as long.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do all the due diligence, come up with the budget, come up with the plan, and then once everything gets started, throw the plan away, double the budget, triple the time, and you're going to get through it.
Yep.
I've got it. You just buy a pre-built race car. Somebody's already had the scope creep already.
Man.
Yeah. There you go.
Oh,
Man, how'd that work out, Ryan?
So far, way better.
Wait a minute, yeah. There's been a little bit of scope creep in that. I mean, like with the fuel cell and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But it's like
That's true.
it is already built, and you, in that case, you learned a lot from it. We've all learned a
Mhm.
lot from that car. It's kind of shaping a lot of we're changing a lot of our perspectives on how to make these
this
cars.
has come up when I talk about building a spec Miata to friends. They're like, you can buy it. There's tons of used ones out there. You could buy one for about what it'll cost and probably less time than it'll take you to build it.
Mhm.
And they're not wrong, but the problem is I never have that lump sum of money.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, well, sure, couldn't you just wait a couple months and save up? But I can't save money. Like, it's
You have too
not
many
a
projects to
possibility for me.
save. Like there's
If I have money, I have to spend it. It's not my
Mhm.
fault. It's not my problem. It's just a problem with money, I think. So
it's money's problem. Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
have
it's
to
money's
build these projects because I can't get myself to save up because what if I see like a big old bowl of ice cream I want? I'm gonna buy that bowl of ice cream. Like I can't not eat that. So
Totally natural. Totally natural.
yeah, I can't buy race cars, Ryan.
Yeah.
Fair.
But
Well,
it's like,
yeah.
so like with Nigel, one of the things I was telling Nigel, he's got a couple, he's got a bug-eyed daily. When it came to this scope creep, one of the things I was
spares
telling
and
him,
parts car. Yeah.
But like you still want to get to the track. So don't rush your build and just take your daily to the track.
Yep.
Mhm.
Great plan
And
until you break your daily at the track, and now you've got two broken cars.
So what they need to do is create a subcategory at all these race weekends. Like you got your NASA this and your TT, ST, whatever, and then just tow rig category at the end. Broke the race cars and they're already there, so screw it. We're gonna lower the tire pressure in the dually and get out there and just see what we can do. We'll wear a
Crash
helmet.
my Armada at a track.
Yes. I'm amazed that's not a class yet.
Just the leftover class. Just
Yep.
Yeah.
Though I think in the Paris Dakar Rally, that's why they started racing the trucks. I heard is because the crews started racing from one pit location to the next, and it
That's
got out
awesome.
of hand enough to the point where they're like, "We should just make this a class."
Is that true? Like, because
That's
that's
what I've
awesome.
heard.
That is, yeah, that's how it started.
That's awesome. I love that a lot. Yeah.
Maybe we should all go out and just focus on doing the Dakar.
Or just start
I'm down.
towing race cars to the track and then just unhooking the trailer and leaving the race car on the trailer. Oh no, if I don't bring that, I'm not class legal for the tow rig class.
That's
So
right.
that's just to keep me legal in this class. I don't even know if that thing runs. And then just get out there.
Could you imagine me out there in the RV? Freaking
Yes.
dishes flying everywhere.
I think they did that on Top
Salmon
Gear, and
now.
it was pretty awesome.
Mhm.
Yes, it would be probably the most popular racing class of any weekend.
That'd be
It
amazing.
says, I don't know, something about America maybe or something, but
Oh my gosh.
I'm in.
Also, you want to do Spec Miata because there's so many vehicles involved. Everybody's got a tow rig at the racetrack.
Mhm.
It'd be a deep class.
Yeah, it'd be deep.
class.
Several people breaking cars at the racetrack too. I mean,
I'm not
if that
a
was the
fan-
requirement.
I'm not a fan of like performance equalizer racing though, and there's so many different cars in this category that you would have to run performance equalizers though, right? Like you got your Dodge, you got big because the kind of everyone knows the Cummins is the best motor of all
Diesel
the tow
gas. I mean,
So-
that's a tough one.
If you're towing with gas, then nah, just leave you at home, I guess maybe. So
Put a little gas in the RV for that hot tune.
Oh, there you go.
They're running like kerosene is a controlled fuel in all the diesels now.
Oh man.
All right,
We
Wow.
wouldn't even have
Well,
injectors at the end of the weekend.
We gotta write this down.
Yeah, if only we were recording this.
Yeah.
This is a digital trademark, so we got this.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Tow rig class racing. You heard it here first.
Dibs
We came
did.
up with it on the Syndicate podcast. Yes.
Yep. We get $1 for every tire on track. The Syndicate does. That's
There
our
you
deal. So,
Nice.
do you throw a heart up? How do you do that?
Ryan found
I
the emoji button. I'm not
I
even
did.
sure where that is.
I had to put the heart up for it because I liked it.
Nice. Oh, yay! We all
The
found it.
people listening to the podcast are like, "What the hell are they doing?"
Oh my
Watch
gosh.
the YouTube, you dummies. Come on. Everyone's got
Man.
YouTube.
Yes, there will be a visual version of this podcast. But I think we're winding to the end of this topic, and we have gone in a whole lot of directions that I didn't anticipate. But if you're still listening, thank you very much for listening. Thanks for sticking around to the end. And I think we should call this good for this topic, and we'll just have to come back for the next one. So if you're out there, thanks for listening again. Thanks for your support, and as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning and the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Get your tow rigs ready. This is happening. That's the
Get
last
it
thing I'm
down.
going to say. Yes. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, man.